the 9th of December 1945. A frozen Sunday morning outside Mannheim, Germany. Frost-coated pines stand like silent sentinels as a black 1938 Cadillac staff car slides through the misty stillness. Inside sits General George S. Patton, the hard-driving commander whose Third Army slashed through France and Germany at breathtaking speed, breaking the Nazi war machine and helping end the Second World War. Beside him rides his trusted chief of staff, Major General Hobart Gay. At the wheel is Private Horace Woodring, a skilled driver used to the general's restless hunts for pheasants in the Rhineland countryside. At 11:45 a.m., on a straight stretch of road near the small village of Neckarstadt, an olive-drab U.S. Army 2.5-ton truck appears from the opposite direction. Without warning, it veers across the center line. Metal screams, glass explodes. The Cadillac lurches violently, as if struck by a giant unseen fist. Patton, who moments earlier had been scanning the frosted fields for game birds, is thrown forward, his head smashing the steel frame of the partition behind the driver's seat. Gay and Woodring escape without a scratch. Patton is gravely injured, his neck broken. He is rushed to the U.S. Army Hospital in Heidelberg. Doctors believe he will recover, albeit paralyzed. But 12 days later, December 21, George S. Patton is dead. The official cause: pulmonary embolism, a blood clot from the crash. The official conclusion: a tragic accident. Yet questions began almost immediately. Why was no full military investigation ordered? Why was the truck driver quietly flown to England and kept from questioning? Why did Patton's health suddenly collapse when doctors expected improvement? Was it fate or the finishing touch of an assassin's plan? George Smith Patton Jr. was born in 1885 to a proud military family in California. From childhood, he devoured stories of ancient warriors and dreamed of personal glory. After West Point, he distinguished himself as a cavalryman, and in World War I, became one of America's first tank commanders. By October 1940, with Europe already at war, Patton was promoted to brigadier general, taking command of the 2nd Armored Division at Fort Benning, Georgia. When the United States finally entered World War II, he was ready. In November 1942, his forces stormed ashore in Operation Torch, seizing key Moroccan ports. In July 1943, he spearheaded the Allied invasion of Sicily, moving with such audacity that even Britain's celebrated Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery grudgingly acknowledged his genius. But Patton's brilliance was matched by a volatile temper and a taste for blunt, even brutal, words. Patton often said what others merely thought, and it cost him. In June 1943, he told troops that prisoners were not to be taken remarks linked to the later killing of 73 Italian POWs by soldiers of the U.S. 45th Division. To avoid a scandal, General Omar Bradley dropped the charges. Worse followed. Visiting frontline hospitals that summer, Patton slapped 2 shell-shocked soldiers, calling one a coward and shouting that the other ought to be shot. News of the incidents leaked, and the American press erupted. Only Eisenhower's personal intervention saved his career. Yet when Germany launched its desperate Battle of the Bulge in late 1944, Patton redeemed himself spectacularly. In a winter blizzard, he wheeled his entire Third Army north, relieving besieged Bastogne and shattering German hopes of prolonging the war. Patton had become indispensable and dangerous. His contempt for political caution and his hatred of communism worried Allied leaders. Even as the Nazi threat collapsed, he warned bluntly that the Soviet Union would be America's next enemy and urged striking them while US forces were already in Europe. Washington and Moscow both listened and both grew uneasy. On the morning of December 9, 1945, Patton was restless. Stationed in occupied Germany, he decided to spend the day hunting pheasants near Mannheim. His black 1938 Cadillac staff car rolled out of headquarters with Private Horace Woodring at the wheel and Major General Hobart Gay beside him. Patton sat in the back seat, relaxed, scanning the frosty fields for game. At 11:45 a.m., on a long, straight stretch of road near Neckarstadt, disaster struck. An olive-drab, 2.5-ton Army truck, driven by Private Robert Thompson, suddenly lurched across the center line. The impact was violent. Metal shrieked, glass exploded, and the Cadillac jolted sideways. Woodring and Gay emerged shaken but unharmed. Only Patton suffered. hurled forward, his head slammed into the steel partition, snapping his neck. He was rushed to the U.S. Army Hospital in Heidelberg. Despite paralysis, doctors were optimistic. They expected the general to survive and even return home, confined perhaps to a wheelchair. But within days, his condition shifted. He grew weaker, then suddenly collapsed. On December 21, he was dead, his death certificate, citing a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot from his injuries. Oddly, the incident was treated as minor at first. Military police on scene dismissed it as a trivial accident. No high-level U.S. Army investigation followed. More curious still, Robert Thompson, the truck driver, was flown to England within hours, allegedly for his own protection. His testimony was never scrutinized in depth. For many, these details were troubling. How could America's most celebrated general die in what seemed like such a routine crash? And why were normal procedures, investigation, questioning, and later an autopsy simply bypassed? What looked like a random accident began to feel more like the first chapter of a mystery still unsolved today. For decades, the official explanation stood unchallenged until startling testimony surfaced. In 1979, Douglas Bazada, a decorated World War II OSS operative, claimed in an interview that Patton had been targeted for assassination. According to Bazada, OSS Chief William Wild Bill Donovan feared Patton's anti-Soviet crusade could derail delicate post-war agreements. Bazada said he was ordered to help arrange the accident, but could not bring himself to pull the final trigger. He alleged that an accomplice identified only as the Pole fired a shot when the truck struck Patton's Cadillac. When the crash failed to kill the general, Bazada claimed a slow-acting cyanide compound was administered in the hospital to induce fatal embolisms within 48 hours. No autopsy was ever performed. Patton's widow declined it, so chemical evidence, if any, was lost. In 2008, journalist Robert Wilcox reignited the debate with Target Patton, citing OSS files and Bazada's testimony to argue that an assassination order came from the very top. Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard echoed similar suspicions in killing Patton. Despite official claims of a tragic accident, critical details keep the mystery alive. First, missing records. Key accident reports and some OSS files remain sealed or inexplicably lost, leaving gaps that fuel suspicion. Second, the car on display today isn't the same Cadillac photographed after the crash, a strange substitution never fully explained. Third, medical surprises. Doctors initially believed Patton would recover enough to return home, yet his health suddenly collapsed, ending in a fatal pulmonary embolism only 12 days later. Add to this the swift removal of truck driver Robert Thompson to England, which curtailed deeper questioning, and the family's decision against an autopsy, and the story becomes even murkier. Individually, these facts might be coincidences. Together, they create a web of unanswered questions, clues, and contradictions that continue to cast doubt on the official narrative of George S. Patton's death. George S. Patton was buried with his troops at the Luxembourg American Cemetery, as he had requested. To admirers, he was the quintessential fighting general. To critics, he was reckless and politically explosive. Whether a victim of chance or conspiracy, his death at age 60 changed the post-war landscape. A living Patton might have challenged the US policy of cooperation with Stalin, perhaps altering the first moves of the Cold War. 70+ years later, the truth remains elusive. Was Patton silenced because he threatened a fragile peace? Or did a random truck and an unlucky clot end one of America's greatest military careers?